Grand Admiral Zexthul stared at the strange object floating in space before his massive warship. The object was old, very old. His ship's computers said it was made from materials they had never seen before. The metal seemed to glow with its own light, and strange symbols covered its surface. "What is this thing?" Zexthul asked his science officer. The science officer, a tall blue creature with 4 arms, looked at his readings. "Admiral, this appears to be some kind of beacon. It's broadcasting a message on multiple frequencies. Play it," the Admiral ordered. Suddenly the bridge filled with voices speaking in different languages. The translation computer worked quickly, and soon Zexthul could understand the words. The message was simple but clear. Terran domain entry forbidden by order of the First Compact. Zexthul had ruled space fleets for over 200 years. He had conquered dozens of worlds for the great Galaxian Empire, but he had never heard of this Terran domain or First Compact. "How old is this beacon?" he asked. His science officer checked the readings again. His face went pale. "Admiral, according to our tests, this beacon is over 50,000 years old. Maybe older, 50,000 years. That was before the Empire existed. That was before most civilizations in the galaxy had even discovered fire." Zexthul felt a strange chill run down his spine. "Send word to the capital," he ordered. "Tell them we need experts here. I want to know everything about this beacon and this warning." 3 days later, a ship arrived carrying the Empire's best scientists and historians. Dr. Veltar was the most famous expert on ancient civilizations in the galaxy. She studied the beacon carefully, taking readings and examining every symbol. "This is incredible," she told Zexthul. "These symbols appear in legends from dozens of different worlds. They all tell stories about something called the First Compact." "What kind of stories?" Zexthul asked. Dr. Veltar pulled up images on her computer. "Every old civilization has legends about powerful beings who lived long ago. They say these beings were so advanced that they could control space and time itself. The stories claim they formed an alliance called the First Compact to protect the galaxy from great dangers. Where did they go? The legends say they became so powerful that they stopped needing physical bodies. They became beings of pure energy and left our reality behind." Zexthul laughed. "Fairy tales and myths. Every primitive world has stories about magical beings." But Dr. Veltar looked serious. "Admiral, I've studied hundreds of different civilizations. They all have these same stories. Beings who could move planets, creatures who could travel faster than light without ships, powers that could destroy stars with a thought." "Even if these stories were true," Zexthul said, "that was 50,000 years ago. Whatever this First Compact was, they're gone now." Dr. Veltar nodded slowly. "Yes, but the beacon is still here, still broadcasting its warning." Zexthul looked at the star system beyond the beacon. His ships had already scanned it from a distance. There was one star, yellow and warm. 9 planets orbited it. The 3rd planet looked promising. It had water, oxygen, and signs of life. "What do our scans show about this system?" he asked his tactical officer. "The 3rd planet has a young species called humans," the officer reported. "They appear to be mammals. They've only recently developed space travel. Very primitive technology." "How primitive?" "They still use chemical rockets to leave their planet. They have nuclear weapons, but nothing close to our energy weapons. They have some basic space stations, but nothing that could threaten our ships." Zexthul studied the data. These humans had barely left their own planet. They were thousands of years behind Empire technology. How could such primitive creatures be connected to an ancient warning from a legendary civilization? "Maybe the warning was meant to protect some other species," suggested Dr. Veltar. "Perhaps the original inhabitants of the system were powerful, and these humans simply evolved on the same planet later." That made sense to Zexthul. The First Compact, if it ever existed, probably placed the beacon to protect some advanced species. But that species was clearly gone now. Only these primitive humans remained. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the human planet. Put it on screen." The image showed a human face. The creature looked strange to Zexthul. It had only 2 eyes and its skin was a pale pink color. The human was speaking, but the words meant nothing until the translation computer worked out the language. "Unknown vessels, this is Earth Space Command. You are approaching restricted space. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." Zexthul almost laughed. These creatures were warning him away from their space? A species that couldn't even travel to other star systems was trying to give orders to the mighty Galaxian Empire? "Open a channel," he ordered. The human on the screen looked surprised when Zexthol's image appeared. The creature's eyes went wide and it stepped back slightly. "I am Grand Admiral Zexthol of the Calaxian Galactic Empire," he announced. "We claim this system for the Empire. You will prepare for peaceful integration into our civilization." The human was quiet for a long moment. Then it said, "Admiral, we cannot allow that. This system is under protection." "We suggest you leave peacefully. Protection." "From who?" Zexthol looked around at his fleet. He had brought 50 warships to investigate the beacon. Each ship could destroy a planet. What protection could these primitive humans possibly have? "You are in no position to make demands," Zexthol replied. "Your technology is thousands of years behind ours. Surrender now and we will treat you fairly." The human's face changed. Something hard entered its eyes. "Admiral, you don't understand. There are forces here beyond your knowledge. The warning is real. Please turn back before it's too late." Before it's too late? Zexthol had conquered civilizations far more advanced than these humans. He had faced energy beings, hive minds, and machine intelligences. What could a species that still used chemical rockets possibly do to threaten him? "Dr. Veltar," he said, turning away from the screen. "Are there any other life forms in this system? Any hidden technologies we might have missed?" Dr. Veltar checked her readings again. "No, Admiral. Just the humans and some basic animals on their planet. No advanced technology anywhere except their primitive satellites and space stations." Zexthol made his decision. The ancient beacon was just that, ancient. Whatever the first compact had been, they were gone. The warning no longer applied. These humans were simply the latest species to evolve on a planet that once held greater beings. "Prepare the fleet for system entry," he ordered. "We'll give the humans one more chance to surrender. If they refuse, we'll demonstrate the price of defying the Empire." As his ships moved past the ancient beacon, Zexthol noticed something strange. The beacon's glow seemed to pulse faster, and new symbols appeared on its surface. But he ignored these signs. He was focused on the primitive planet ahead and its equally primitive inhabitants. Behind them, the beacon continued to pulse, sending signals deep into space toward places no one in the Empire had ever imagined. Admiral Zexthol expected the humans to surrender the moment they saw his fleet. 200 Empire warships had entered their solar system, each one bigger and more powerful than anything the humans had ever built. His smallest scout ship could destroy their largest space station with a single shot, but the humans did not surrender. Instead, they did something that surprised everyone on the Empire ships. "They attacked, Admiral," his tactical officer shouted. "Multiple human vessels approaching our position." Zexthol looked at the battle display. Dozens of human ships were racing toward his fleet. They were small and looked like metal boxes with engines attached. Compared to his sleek warships, they looked like children's toys. "How many ships?" he asked. 57 confirmed, sir. More launching from their planet and space stations." Zexthol almost laughed. 57 primitive ships against 200 advanced warships? This would be over in minutes. "Open fire when they come in range," he ordered. "Try not to destroy them all. We need some survivors to question." The first human ship entered weapons range. Zexthol's gunners fired a single energy beam, expecting to vaporize the tiny vessel. But something impossible happened. The human ship twisted away from the beam with movements no ship should be able to make. It spun and rolled like a living creature, avoiding the deadly energy. "What was that?" Zexthol demanded. "Unknown, sir. The human ship moved faster than our targeting computers predicted." More human ships entered the battle. They moved in ways that hurt Zexthol's eyes to watch. They didn't fly like normal spacecraft. They darted and weaved like angry insects, never staying in one place long enough for the Empire weapons to lock on. And then the humans opened fire. Their weapons were primitive compared to Empire technology. Simple projectiles and basic energy beams. But they aimed these weapons with impossible accuracy. Every shot hit exactly where it would do the most damage. "Sir," the tactical officer called out, "the humans are targeting our weapon systems and engines specifically." "They know exactly where to hit us. How is that possible?" The humans had never seen Empire ships before. How could they know the weak points so quickly? "Focus fire on one human ship," Zexthol ordered. "All nearby vessels, destroy that target." 5 Empire warships turned their weapons on a single human vessel. There was no way it could escape that much firepower. The beams struck the small ship from multiple directions, but instead of being destroyed, something else happened. The human ship exploded, yes, but as it died, it changed course directly toward one of the Empire vessels. The wreckage, still moving at tremendous speed, smashed into the Empire ship's bridge. Both ships were destroyed. "They rammed us," Zexthol whispered. "They turned their dying ship into a weapon." This had never happened before in any of Zexthol's battles. When ships were badly damaged, their crews surrendered or tried to escape. They didn't turn their vessels into suicide weapons, but that was exactly what the humans kept doing. Every time an Empire ship destroyed a human vessel, the human crew would use their last moments to cause as much damage as possible. They rammed Empire ships, overloaded their engines to create explosions, and even ejected their nuclear reactors to detonate next to Empire vessels. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "we're receiving surrender signals from the human fleet." Finally, Zexthol thought. "Put them on screen." A human face appeared. The creature looked young with short yellow hair and bright blue eyes. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force," she said. "We wish to discuss terms." "I accept your surrender," Zexthol replied. "Prepare to be boarded." The human female tilted her head slightly. "I think you misunderstood, Admiral. We're not surrendering. We're offering you a chance to surrender to us." Zexthol stared at the screen. Was this creature insane? The humans had lost 30 ships already. The Empire had only lost 8 vessels, and those were due to the humans' crazy ramming tactics. "You cannot be serious," he said. "You are vastly outnumbered." "Numbers aren't everything," Captain Chen replied. "We've studied your tactics during this battle. Your ships are powerful but slow. Your weapons are advanced but take time to aim. Your crews are trained but not creative. And what does that matter?" The human smiled, and something about that expression made Zexthol feel uncomfortable. "It matters because we've been fighting each other for thousands of years, Admiral. We know every trick, every strategy, every way to win when you're outnumbered and outgunned." As if to prove her point, the remaining human ships suddenly changed their attack pattern. Instead of engaging the Empire vessels directly, they began moving in complex formations. They used the Empire's own ships as cover, forcing the larger vessels to risk hitting each other if they wanted to fire at the humans. "Clever," admitted Zexthol's tactical officer. "They're using our size against us." But clever tactics weren't enough to overcome such a difference in firepower. The Empire ships adapted to the new strategy and began destroying human vessels again. Soon, only a dozen human ships remained. That was when the humans did something that no species in galactic history had ever done. The surviving human ships didn't retreat. They didn't try to escape. Instead, they accelerated directly toward the largest Empire vessels at maximum speed. "They're all going to ram us," the tactical officer shouted. "Destroy them before they reach us," Zexthol ordered. The Empire ships fired everything they had. Beam after beam struck the approaching human vessels. Most were destroyed, but their wreckage continued forward. The few ships that survived the barrage smashed into Empire vessels with devastating results. When the battle ended, 60 Empire ships had been destroyed or badly damaged. All the human ships were gone, but they had taken nearly a third of Zexthol's fleet with them. "Admiral," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving a message from the human planet." Put it on screen. This time a different human appeared. This one was older, with gray hair and dark skin. "Admiral Zexthol, this is General Morrison, Supreme Commander of Earth's military forces." "Your fleet is destroyed," Zexthol said. "Surrender now or we will destroy your planet." General Morrison nodded slowly. "That fleet was just our first response team, Admiral. They bought us time to prepare our real defenses." First response team? Those ships had fought like demons and inflicted terrible losses on his fleet. If that was just their first team, what were their real defenses like? "You're bluffing," Zexthol said, but he wasn't sure he believed it. "We captured several of your crew members when their ships were damaged," General Morrison continued. "We've been asking them questions about your empire. That was impossible. Zexthol's crew were trained to resist interrogation. They had mental conditioning that prevented them from revealing secrets to enemies. Your crew told us some interesting things," the general said. "They told us about your other conquests. How species always surrender when they see your fleet. How you've never faced real resistance before. What's your point?" Zexthol demanded. General Morrison's expression grew hard. "My point is that you don't understand what you're dealing with here. Every species you've conquered had submission instincts. When faced with overwhelming force, they gave up. But humans don't have that instinct, Admiral. We don't know how to quit." "Everyone can be defeated," Zexthol said. "Maybe," the general admitted, "but we'll make you pay for every inch." We'll turn every moon, every asteroid, every piece of space debris into a weapon. We'll fight you in ways you've never imagined because we've spent our entire history fighting each other." The transmission ended, leaving Zex Thul staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew worked quietly to repair the damage from the battle. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Zex Thul wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Emperor Vextar stood in the center of his massive throne room, reading the battle report from Admiral Zex Thul. His 6 eyes glowed with rage as he processed the impossible information. 60 Imperial warships destroyed by primitive humans? It was unthinkable. "Bring me the Admiral immediately," he commanded his aide. When Zex Thul's image appeared on the communication screen, the Emperor could see the shame in his officer's face. The Admiral's usually perfect uniform was torn and dirty from the battle. "Explain to me," the Emperor said slowly, "how a species that has not even mastered interstellar travel managed to destroy 60 of our finest warships." "Your Majesty," Zex Thul began, "these humans fight differently than any species we have encountered. They show no fear of death. When their ships are destroyed, they use the wreckage as weapons. They refuse to surrender even when facing certain defeat. You are telling me that primitive creatures are superior warriors to our trained soldiers? Not superior, Your Majesty, just different. They think in ways we do not expect. They use tactics that seem insane but somehow work." Emperor Vextar had ruled the galaxy for 300 years. His empire controlled over 10,000 worlds. No species had ever successfully resisted imperial conquest for more than a few days. The idea that a single primitive planet could defeat his forces was both humiliating and dangerous. If word of this defeat spreads, he told his advisors, other worlds might think they can resist us as well. "This cannot be allowed." "What are your orders, Your Majesty?" asked Grand General Kethmore, the Empire's supreme military commander. "Assemble the largest fleet in Imperial history," the Emperor declared. "I want 10,000 ships, our best crews, our most powerful weapons, our deadliest biological agents. This human world will become an example of what happens to species that defy the Empire." 10,000 ships, Your Majesty? That is our entire active fleet, then so be it. These humans will learn that resistance is futile. Within days, ships began gathering at the Imperial staging area, massive dreadnoughts that could crack planets in half, biological warfare vessels carrying diseases that could kill entire species, reality-warping ships that used technologies beyond normal physics. The fleet that assembled was larger than any military force in galactic history. It carried enough firepower to destroy 100 worlds like Earth. But as the great fleet prepared to depart, strange things began happening across the galaxy. On the ancient world of Veldana, monuments that had been dark for 50,000 years suddenly began glowing. The planet's inhabitants, a race of elderly philosophers, felt a chill of fear they could not explain. "The old warnings are awakening," their eldest sage whispered. "Something terrible approaches." On Krindar, the homeworld of the Empire's oldest allies, massive computer systems that had been dormant since before recorded history came online without any command. They began broadcasting messages in languages no one could understand. "What do the machines say?" asked the planetary governor. His scientists worked frantically to translate the ancient signals. When they succeeded, their faces went pale with terror. "They are warning messages, sir. Over and over they repeat, 'The Guardians wake,' the compact calls, 'Flee while you can.'" Similar events happened on dozens of worlds. Ancient artifacts activated, long-dead machines began speaking. Elder races that had been peaceful for millennia suddenly began evacuating their homeworlds. Emperor Vextar received reports of these strange events but dismissed them as coincidence. Primitive superstitions meant nothing to the might of the Empire. Meanwhile, the fleet's advanced scouts reported increasingly bizarre readings from the human solar system. "The electromagnetic signature around their planet is changing," reported Scout Captain Merval. "Energy readings are increasing by factors we cannot measure." "What kind of energy?" asked Admiral Zex Thul, who had been given command of the advance force. "Unknown, sir. Our instruments cannot identify the source. It appears to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time." More disturbing reports followed. Human radio transmissions had changed from normal communications to something that sounded almost like singing. But not human singing. The harmonics were impossible, using frequencies that should not exist. "It sounds like they are calling to something," reported the communications officer, but we cannot determine what. The most frightening report came from the navigation department. Admiral, the chief navigator said quietly, space itself appears to be changing around the human system. What do you mean, changing? The distance between their star and surrounding space keeps shifting. Sometimes the system appears normal. Other times it seems to be millions of light years away. And sometimes what? Sometimes it appears to be in multiple locations at once. Zexthul stared at the readings. This was impossible. Space did not simply change. There had to be a scientific explanation. But deep in his mind, he remembered the ancient beacon and its warning. He remembered Dr. Veltar's words about legendary beings who could control space and time. Send a message to the main fleet, he ordered. Tell them to proceed with caution. Something unusual is happening here. The great Imperial fleet continued its approach toward the human solar system. 10,000 ships carrying death and destruction, confident in their overwhelming power. But as they traveled through space, more strange things happened. Ships reported seeing impossible lights in the void between stars. Crews began having dreams of vast beings made of pure energy, watching them from impossible distances. On his flagship, Emperor Vextar stood before a massive display showing their target system. The primitive planet Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, apparently helpless before his approaching armada. How long until we arrive? He asked. 12 hours, Your Majesty, replied his navigation officer. And the humans? Are they preparing defenses? Unknown, sir. Our long-range sensors show unusual activity around their planet, but we cannot determine what they are doing. Emperor Vexitar smiled with satisfaction. Soon this embarrassment would be over. The humans would be destroyed, and the galaxy would remember why the Empire was not to be challenged. But in the depths of space around Earth, reality began to ripple like water. Ancient machines, older than civilization itself, slowly awakened from their long sleep, and somewhere in the space between dimensions, beings of impossible power began to stir, responding to a call they had hoped never to hear again. The Empire was about to learn that some warnings exist for very good reasons. As the great fleet entered the outer edges of the solar system, space around them began to shimmer and change. The stars themselves seemed to shift position, and from the darkness between worlds, new contacts began appearing on their sensors, ships unlike anything in their databases, vessels that seemed to be made of crystallized starlight and solidified time. Your Majesty, his tactical officer whispered, we are no longer alone. The Imperial fleet stopped moving as impossible ships materialized around them. These new vessels looked like they were built from captured starlight and frozen time. They had no engines that anyone could see, yet they moved through space like living creatures swimming through water. Emperor Vextar stared at the displays in shock. His sensors could not properly read these new ships. Sometimes they appeared solid, sometimes they seemed to be made of pure energy, and sometimes they appeared to exist in several places at once. What are those things? He demanded. His science officer worked frantically at his console. I cannot determine their composition, Your Majesty. Our instruments give different readings every second. They appear to be constructed from materials that should not be able to exist. More ships continued to appear. Not dozens, but hundreds. Then thousands. They surrounded the Imperial fleet completely, yet somehow never seemed crowded. They existed in normal space and other dimensions at the same time. Open a communication channel, the Emperor ordered. To which ship, Your Majesty? Before anyone could answer, every screen on every Imperial ship activated at once. A figure appeared that made the Emperor's blood freeze in his veins. The being looked somewhat like the humans, but it was clearly something far beyond any normal life form. Its body seemed to be made of condensed starlight, and its eyes held the depth of eternity. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. I am Keeper Zenthar of the Ascended, the being said. You have ignored our warning. You have threatened our chosen inheritors. Explain your actions. Emperor Vextar had ruled for centuries, but he had never felt fear like this. This creature radiated power that made his entire fleet seem like toys, yet his pride would not let him show weakness. I am Emperor Vextar, ruler of the Calaxian Empire. These humans are primitive creatures who have defied imperial law. They will be punished. The Ascended being studied him with those ancient eyes. You understand nothing of what you face. These primitive creatures are the inheritors of the first compact. They carry within them the genetic legacy of those who shaped the galaxy, before your species even existed. Impossible, the Emperor said. The humans are barely capable of spaceflight. Because they have been sleeping, another voice said. This time it came from the human planet below. A new figure appeared on the communication screens. It was a human female, but something had changed about her. Her eyes glowed with inner light, and she seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, just like the ascended beings. "I am Sarah Chen," she said, though her voice now carried harmonics that no human throat should be able to produce. "Captain of the Earth vessel Indomitable. And you, Emperor, have made a serious mistake." "What is happening?" Vextar whispered. Keeper Zinthara answered. 50,000 years ago, the species that would become the Ascended realized they were evolving beyond physical existence. Before we transcended, we created a backup plan. We took the best of our genetic material and seeded it on a single world. Images began appearing on every screen throughout the Imperial fleet. Ancient laboratories, beings of incredible power working with technologies beyond imagination, a blue planet being carefully prepared for new life. "We created the human species," Sarah Chen continued, "to be our inheritors. They carry our memories in their genes, our abilities in their DNA, our determination in their souls. But we hid these gifts until they were needed." "The beacon," Admiral Zexthul said suddenly. "The warning beacon was not protecting the humans from others. It was protecting others from the humans." "Correct," Keeper Zenthara confirmed. "We hoped it would never be necessary to wake our children. We wanted them to grow and develop naturally. But when faced with extinction, their true nature emerges." Emperor Vextar watched in horror as more changes became visible on the human ships. The primitive vessels began transforming, their metal hulls flowing like liquid to form new shapes. Technology that had been hidden in their very atoms began to activate. "This is why they fought so strangely," he realized. "They were not using tactics we taught them. They were using strategies from your memories. Every human carries within them the experience of 1,000 ancient civilizations," Sarah Chen said. "When we are threatened, that knowledge awakens. We remember how to fight wars across dimensions. We recall technologies that can reshape reality itself." Around the Imperial fleet, space itself began to change. Stars moved to new positions. Time flowed differently in some areas than others. The very laws of physics bent to accommodate powers that existed beyond normal understanding. "Your species has a saying," Keeper Zenthara said. "Humanity for, yeah." They use crude language, but the sentiment is accurate. When faced with impossible odds, humans do not surrender. They become impossible themselves. Emperor Vexitar looked at his fleet of 10,000 ships, the largest military force in galactic history. Suddenly it seemed pathetically small compared to the powers arrayed against him. "What do you want?" he asked. "We want you to leave," Sarah Chen replied. "Take your ships and go back to your empire. Tell everyone what you have learned here. Explain that humanity is under the protection of forces they cannot comprehend." "And if I refuse?" The space around the Imperial fleet suddenly filled with light. Not the light of stars or energy weapons, but something far more fundamental. It was the light of creation itself, the power that had built the universe. "Then you will discover why we left the warning beacon," Keeper Zenthara said simply. Emperor Vextar realized he was looking at his own death. Not just his death, but the death of his entire fleet, his empire, possibly his entire species. These beings wielded power that could unmake reality itself. But before he could respond, something unexpected happened. From the largest human vessel came a new transmission. This time it was not Sarah Chen, but a different human, an older male with gray hair and kind eyes. "Keeper Zenthara," the man said. "With respect, I believe the Emperor deserves a chance to understand what he is truly facing before he makes his decision." The Ascended being turned its attention to the human. "Explain, Admiral Harrison." "Your Majesty," Admiral Harrison said, addressing the Emperor directly. "You have conquered thousands of worlds, correct?" "Yes," Vextar replied cautiously. "And in every case, the local species eventually surrendered when faced with overwhelming force?" "That is correct. That is because every other species in the galaxy evolved submission instincts. When faced with certain death, they surrender to preserve some part of their people. It is a logical survival strategy." Emperor Vextar nodded. This was exactly how his conquest had always proceeded. "But humans evolved differently," Admiral Harrison continued. We evolved on a world where surrender meant death anyway. So we learned that the only choice was to fight, no matter the odds. We cannot surrender, Your Majesty. It is not in our nature. Even when facing certain defeat, especially then, that is when we become most dangerous. As if to demonstrate this point, the human ships around Earth began moving into attack formations. Despite being vastly outnumbered, despite facing the largest fleet in galactic history, they prepared to fight. You see, Sarah Chen said, her transformed voice carrying across all frequencies. We are not threatening you, Emperor. We are simply showing you what we are. We are the children of gods, and we do not know how to quit. Emperor Vextar looked at the impossible scene around his fleet. Ascended beings of pure energy surrounded his ships while humans who had somehow awakened ancient powers prepared for battle. He had come here to crush a primitive species, and instead found himself facing the inheritors of the most powerful civilization in galactic history. But Vextar had not become emperor by being weak. Even facing certain death, his pride demanded one final test of strength. If these humans are truly the children of gods, he announced, then let them prove it in single combat. I challenge their greatest warrior to face me in personal battle. Keeper Zenthara turned its glowing form toward the Emperor. You do not understand what you ask. Our children have awakened powers that could unmake your very existence. Then it should be easy for them to defeat me. From the human fleet came Sarah Chen's transformed voice. I accept your challenge, Emperor. Sarah, no. Admiral Harrison's voice cut across the communication. You have only just awakened. You do not yet fully understand your abilities. I understand enough, Sarah replied, and someone needs to show the galaxy that humans will not be bullied, even by emperors. Space around the two fleets began to change as ancient powers prepared an arena for combat. Reality twisted and reshaped itself until a sphere of crystallized spacetime formed between the opposing forces. Inside this sphere, the normal laws of physics would be suspended, allowing beings of vastly different power levels to fight as equals. Emperor Vextar piloted his personal combat mech into the arena. The machine was a masterpiece of Imperial technology, armed with weapons that could destroy entire cities and protected by shields that could stop nuclear explosions. Sarah Chen entered the arena in what appeared to be a simple human spacesuit. She carried no visible weapons and had no apparent protection beyond the thin fabric of her suit. You are either very brave or very foolish, the Emperor said as they faced each other in the crystalline space. Probably both, Sarah admitted, but that's what makes us human. The battle began with the Emperor firing every weapon his mech possessed. Energy beams, plasma cannons, and reality-warping missiles all struck the small human figure. But instead of being destroyed, Sarah simply moved. She flowed through the attacks like water, her awakened abilities allowing her to exist in the spaces between the weapon strikes. Impossible, the Emperor whispered. Sarah raised her hand, and suddenly the Emperor's mech began to come apart. Not breaking or exploding, but actually dissolving as the bonds between its atoms were gently convinced to let go. We learned to do this by accident, Sarah said as she approached the helpless Emperor. Humans have always been good at taking things apart. Now we can do it at the molecular level. Emperor Vextar found himself floating in space protected only by his personal armor. Around him, the pieces of his mighty war machine drifted like confetti. You could kill me now, he said. Yes, Sarah agreed. I could unmake you so completely that you would never have existed. I could reach back through time and prevent your birth. I could erase your entire bloodline from history. The Emperor waited for death, but it did not come. But I won't, Sarah continued, because that's not who we are. Humans don't fight to destroy. We fight to protect. And right now, I'm going to protect you from your own stupidity. She gestured, and suddenly the Emperor found himself back on his flagship, unharmed. Around him, his bridge crew stared in amazement. How? He whispered. Sarah Chen's image appeared on his main screen. Her appearance had returned to normal, though her eyes still held depths that spoke of newly awakened power. The Ascended taught us something important when they created us, she explained. True strength isn't about how much you can destroy. It's about how much you can choose not to destroy. Admiral Harrison appeared beside her. Your Majesty, you came here to conquer us. But conquest requires that we be weaker than you. We are not. Then what happens now? The Emperor asked. Now you have a choice, Sarah said. You can continue trying to fight us, in which case we will defend ourselves with powers you cannot comprehend. Or you can accept that things have changed in the galaxy. What kind of change? Keeper Zenthara's voice filled the Imperial flagship. The same change that happened 50,000 years ago when the first compact was formed. The galaxy needs protectors again. Threats are coming that your empire cannot face alone. Images began appearing on every screen in the fleet. Dark shapes moving between distant stars. Entire solar systems going silent for no apparent reason. Something vast and hungry approaching from outside the galaxy itself. The Devourers, Admiral Harrison said quietly. We have been sensing them for months. They consumed other galaxies before setting their sights on ours. Your empire is powerful, Sarah added, but you cannot fight beings that eat entire star systems. None of the current galactic civilizations can. That's why we were created, to be ready when the real threats arrived. Emperor Vextar studied the terrible images. If these threats were real, then his empire was doomed no matter how many worlds he conquered. What are you proposing? He asked. A new compact, Sarah said. An alliance between all the species of the galaxy. Humans will serve as protectors, as our ancestors did. But we cannot do it alone. We need the Empire's ships, the knowledge of the elder races, the resources of 1,000 worlds. And in return, everyone gets to keep existing. The Emperor was quiet for a long time. His entire worldview had been shattered in a single day. Everything he thought he knew about power, about conquest, about the nature of the galaxy itself had been proven wrong. If I agree to this alliance, he said finally, what happens to the Empire? The Empire continues, Admiral Harrison assured him. But it becomes part of something larger. Instead of conquering worlds, you'll be protecting them. And humanity? Sarah smiled, and for a moment she looked like a normal young woman instead of a being of cosmic power. Humanity will do what we've always done. We'll fight the impossible fights, face the unbeatable enemies, and somehow find a way to win. Emperor Vextar made his decision. Very well. I accept this. New compact. The moment he spoke those words, space around the fleets began to change again. The ascended beings started to fade back into their higher dimensions, their work complete. But before they vanished entirely, Keeper Zenthara spoke one final time. Remember this day, children of the galaxy. Remember that when darkness comes, there will always be those who stand against it. And remember that sometimes the ones who look weakest are actually the strongest of all. 1 year later, new beacons appeared around human space. But these beacons carried a different message than the ancient warnings. They broadcasted in every language known to galactic civilization. Terran domain, all welcome, by invitation only. Protectors of the galaxy. Those who seek peace, enter freely. Those who bring war, turn back now. And beneath that message, in smaller text, was a phrase that quickly became famous throughout the galaxy. Warning, residents may respond to threats with disproportionate force and excessive creativity. Management is not responsible for impossible victories or physics-defying tactics. The galaxy had new guardians. They were young, they were crazy, and they absolutely did not know when to quit. And that, everyone agreed, was probably exactly what the galaxy needed.